Welcome to the 26th edition of the Panama Interview Series, where we discuss topics regarding the economic growth of Latin America and the Caribbean. We are streaming live from the capital city of the Republic of Panama. The Panama Interview Series is produced by Bico Legal and Compliance Consulting LLC, a Miami domiciled limited liability company with offices in downtown Miami and Panama City, Panama. My name is Anthony Robinson, and I am the managing member of Bico Legal and Compliance Consulting. Although I'm a practicing attorney with a passion for cross-border commercial and transactional legal and regulatory compliance matters in the Americas, I also have a passion for the languages of the Americas. Soy de la cuarta generación de panameños por parte de mi papá. Mi abuela y mi bisabuela nacieron en el año o mi bisabuela nacieron en el año de 1907 en la isla del Mar Caribe, en una isla que se llama Bocas del Toro. Y mi papá nació en el año de 1938 en la ciudad de Panamá. Entonces, por otro lado, mi mamá nació en los Estados Unidos. Y además de eso, mi esposa nació y creció en Panamá, en la provincia de Veraguas. Así que nosotros, nuestros hijos de 14 y 10 años de edad, hablan inglés y español. E também eu falo português pelo fato de que tenho clientes no Brasil. A maioria delas são fabricantes de suplementos alimentares no São Paulo e eles desejam vender seus produtos nos Estados Unidos. Na verdade, the seeds of the Panama Interview Series have been germinating in my mind for some time, for close to 30 years, as I have journeyed to this opportunity to discuss on a monthly basis topics regarding economic growth in Latin America and the Caribbean with players in the arenas of law, business, and politics. This morning, we will discuss the emerging trends in the translation services industry with the intent of understanding more deeply the role that translation, localization, and managed language solutions will play in the growth of international corporate expansion in the Americas in the coming years, and in particular in Latin America and the Caribbean. To that end, we are honored to have as our guest Gabriel Sturges, the Director of Idiomatic USA. Idiomatic USA is a leading ISO 9001-2015 provider of translation, localization, and managed language solutions for clients of all sizes and industries, including corporate, government, and private sectors. Idiomatic USA offers professional interpretation and translation services in a wide range of industries and in more than 150 languages. We have several topics to cover in 60 minutes. Please put your questions in the chat and I will submit them to our guest afterwards. Bom, fica tranquilo que na próxima 30 minutos você está no lugar certo, na hora certa e com as pessoas certas para aprender o que está passando na indústria de serviços de tradução e localização. Beleza, vamos lá. Gabe, how are you doing? Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks very much for having me on. I'm good. Very excited to be here.
And where are you streaming from this morning?
So I'm usually based in upstate New York, and now I'm actually in Spain. I'm escaping the cold weather and the snow. So about an hour north of Barcelona.
Very good, very good. Well, I'm not going to waste your valuable time. Please tell us about the mission of Idiomatic, how it started, and the services that it provides.
Well, Idiomatic was started by two colleagues of mine, who are older than myself. The company was started in 1996, actually here in Spain, in the city I'm in right now, called Girona. And the company was founded in the mid-90s as the world was becoming much more globalized. Internet was becoming much more prevalent, more international trade, barriers are being broken. And they realized that a lot of the local companies were beginning to export and had a need to be able to communicate with people, other places within the European Union or across the world. I met my colleagues in 2011 and worked for them originally as a translator. And after a while, I set up our US office, so running businesses for the US and the Americas in general. And the main focus of Idiomatic, our business tenets, let's say, are care for people, fair share, and care for the environment. That's what we focus on. We're very happy to be a carbon neutral company. We believe in the long term, staying with our customers, staying with our clients, not trying to make quick money, trying to really nurture that relationship, and making sure that all parties involved are happy with what we're doing.
Very good, very good. And how does what's the structure of the company? How do you work with your translators and your service provider?
Well, we as a company have in-house translators for some languages, Spanish mainly, Portuguese, and this is all through our branches of Idiomatic throughout the world. We have our company in the US. We have a branch in Brazil, in Recife, which is in the northeast of the country, in Mexico as well. And in these offices, we do in-house work. For other language pairs, we have a series of vetted professionals who've been working with us for years, a lot of them. And when a client deals with us, they aren't just receiving a translation back from one person. A translation goes through an entire process. So the initial evaluation of the project, how long will it take? What is the cost? Who do we assign this to? We send it to our translator, and before delivering, it's revised and goes through a quality control process, making sure the document looks similar to the original, spelling, names, any sort of really important data. So that way, by the time a client receives what we do, quite a few sets of eyes have gone over it.
And we understand that the translation services market is growing. Experts estimate that in 2032, the gross value of the market will be around $53.5 billion, with a growth from 22 to 32 of a CAGR of 2.7%. Where do you see that growth manifesting itself, and kind of what are the main drivers of it?
I've always said to people that translation is probably the biggest industry that you've never heard of, and that's how it should be. You only know that something's been translated when it's bad. So a good translator, really, you'd never know that it's not the original document. The industry is growing. Something like I know we'll talk about later in the podcast is about AI and how that's affecting the industry, or how we can harness that in the industry, I think is a better way to look at it. The translation industry, in my opinion, will continue to grow for the foreseeable future. The world is just becoming that much more interconnected, that much more globalized. You have the global South coming into play, where before, the big hitters in the economic big hitters were always in the Northern Hemisphere, were always Europe and North America. Now you're seeing 3 billion people enter into the market who speak dozens or hundreds of different languages. I think that the translation industry is going to shift. The languages that used to be requested, I don't think will be as requested anymore. I think we're going to see a new segment coming into play. Nigeria, for example, huge market. lots of different languages, obviously, Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Of course, in this case, we're talking about Latin America. Spanish will just continue to grow. Portuguese will just continue to grow. Any of the other smaller languages spoken in Latin America as well. You're going to see a big demand for those growing.
You know, a logical impetus for that growth or driver for that growth is, the growth of those emerging markets. I think those languages are associated with, growing emerging markets.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that played out in your practice and in your experience? That's where a lot of the demand is coming from emerging markets?
I do. We are betting very heavily, and we're placing a lot of our resources in focusing on these markets. I think that the future for the economy, the global economy, I think, is in Latin America, is in Africa, is in Southeast Asia. And we've seen that. We've seen the requests for clients in order to, we're trying to now get into such and such a market. Can you help us localize our website? We're trying to now sell some sort of machinery here. Can you please help us translate an instruction manual? I don't see it stopping. I see it actually just accelerating.
Yeah, in my experience, there is a lot of demand around transactions. So if cross-border selling of goods or manufacturing and selling of goods, or mergers and acquisitions cross-border. But for a lot of companies that are looking to find new customers in international markets, it's localization, right? I mean, they're just trying to find a way to communicate their product, the benefit of their product to the target market in cultural specific and appropriate ways in these new markets. So localization, what do you see? That's going to be affected a lot by technology. Do you feel like that aspect of the services in the industry is going to be automated in the near future?
I think it depends on what we're talking about. Automation, there's been various different like AI or automatic translator revolutions in the industry. Google Translate was one of the first ones. Everybody said, "Oh, the translation industry is done. This is not going to, what are we going to do? We're going to be taken over by a machine." What it did is it separated the wheat from the chaff. So I think you had a lot of kind of not very good translators or not very good linguists who were able to make a living because there was no other alternative as far as tools being available. And you saw a lot of people who weren't professional leave the industry. I think you'll see that now as well. A lot of people who maybe aren't the best at what they do, I think you'll see a lot of people kicked out of the industry. The simple race to the bottom, I think, will be taken care of by AI. And that's fine. Things like localization. I don't see that we use AI, we use tools. It's an assistant in what we do. It helps us do things more quickly, but everything always has to be looked at by a qualified professional. You mentioned localization. For example, we do some work for a company based in the Middle East. The localization goes beyond just the actual translation of what we're doing. We have to make sure the images are okay. You don't want to have an image, for example, in some places, you can't have an image with men and women together. You have to make sure that the clothes that they're wearing in the image are okay. Some of the things that you talk about in a press release, for example. We did a project for a company based in Saudi Arabia, and the English, Spanish, and French texts mentioned Gay Pride Day. We couldn't really talk about that in the Arabic text for Saudi Arabia, just because it's a very taboo subject. So
Right.
I don't know to what point AI will be able to really replace a person. I think you're always going to need that human touch.
Yeah, and we're gonna touch on that a little bit more, but I agree, and I think that as language is really a window to culture, and culture is what really is what's trying to be manifested or communicated, and culture is what's selling. Because we're really talking about commercial uh, context and environments here. Um, the cultural piece is very difficult to automate, because one, it's complex and it's varied and it changes and it's so I think that that's going to be one area where human beings are going to have a competitive advantage. But as if there is, I want to bring out this. I want to introduce this quote by Jaap Vandermeer, who is the founder and director of Translation Automation User Society. And he's a language industry pioneer. His company was the first um, to introduce term extraction and translation memory software. So this gentleman's been at the forefront of technology within the industry for very many years. And he said, quote unquote, the global translation industry finds itself now in a mixed economy condition. On one side, a vertically cascaded supply chain, and on the other, the new flat fee machines model. The speed with which the machines are improving when fed with the right quality and volumes of data makes translation a near zero marginal cost type business. Now, this means that once the right infrastructure is in place, the production of a new translation costs nearly nothing and capacity becomes infinite. And this is where I think that it really becomes interesting, taking into account the fact that the ultimate measure of success in the globalization and localization business is world readiness, meaning that we are able to speak with all customers and citizens on this planet in their own languages. We need to ask ourselves, how sustainable is this mixed economic model? Can the translation sector, as long as it is locked up in a vertical labor-based cost model, scale up to reach the goals of world readiness? End quote. And I think that really just encapsulates, the crux of where the industry is right now. What are your thoughts in that regard?
I guess it's how far you can extrapolate it beyond just translations, right? I mean, you can look. I've read in the papers multiple times lately. AI is going to change. AI already can diagnose, can read echoes better than a radiologist, or can read an X-ray better than a radiologist, I should say. Or AI can drop case law better than a judge or a lawyer or whatever. I think what gets headlines is a bit of this kind of doomsday idea that we'll all be replaced by a machine. I think that it goes back again to quality. What are people after? And there are definitely going to be things that a machine can do better than people. I think that when you talk about something with soul or with this human touch, people like dealing with other people. People like knowing that another living, breathing person looked at something. And that's where I think the future of the industry of what we do is in things like localization. It's in creative translation, translating a book, translating poetry. It's in marketing, advertising. That I think is more where the future of translation is. Not so much in translating an instruction manual. I don't see that as being the future of the industry. It's important, it's necessary. If anything, it will be that a machine would do the heavy lifting, for example, with an instruction manual, would provide a base translation, and you would need an expert human to go through it and make sure that everything's okay. That's where I see, for these kind of large, kind of more cut and dry translations, that's where I see the industry going.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and I think that's where he was going when he focuses on the ability to scale up, because it's at the most aspirational end of where the industry is going. It's what he describes and communicates as world readiness. It's having the ability to communicate with all of your customers in whatever language and cultural situation that they're in, and it's just a matter of resource. Can in a vertical structure where we've got to put a person on the task and we've got to bill an hour or a word, do we have the resources to meet the demand? And I think that's what you're saying. I mean, it's going to have to be a collaboration and partnership with it, because humans alone are not going to be able to meet the demand. I think that's a good segue to look at, Vandermeer's chart, his visual of, the evolution of the industry over the years since 1980, right? So he breaks it down into, I think it's 3 distinct phases. So it's the translation phase from 80 to 90. The 90s, he says, is translation to localization. In the early 2000s, he speaks to globalization, in the logical and apparent sense of the word, meaning of the word. In the 2010s, he says we went through a phase of integration. And integration was, connecting systems and customer relationships, with large amounts of content. It's in 2020 he talks about convergence, right? So he says the integration phase went to a convergence phase, which was exemplified by the fact that we have on our iPhones translation technology, where we can translate everything on our iPhone and everything that we read, and we also can translate interpersonal communications with other human beings with the apps that are on our phone. And that's what he's saying is convergence. And then singularity is kind of the new frontier, which is really a human translator is no longer needed in the process, and technology essentially takes over. You kind of have a ubiquitous, unlimited access to really the capacity to communicate to anyone or with anyone, because it's unlimited and free. So I thought this was fascinating. I'd be really interested, because you're the expert, to see what you think about whether this is accurate or where it may not be as true to form as it should be.
For a lot of this, I started really getting to the industry in the integration phase. So around 2010s. I didn't witness, how it was in the 80s and the 90s, even the early 2000s. I do know, according to my colleagues, that things used to be stacks and stacks and stacks of paper that was faxed everywhere. These huge documents, whatever they might be, and everything had to be done more or less by hand. And in the 2010s, that's when some of the first machine translations came out, and that was like back in the days of the early iterations of Google Translate. And I think all of us can remember they're pretty awful. You would type something in, oh, what does this mean? And it would give you something that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. So it's better and better. now they have source, like kind of source compiled in the early 2020s, late 2010s, before 2020, before things like ChatGPT came out. You had kind of open source compiled translation technology, which went through stacks and stacks and stacks of human correlated data where, okay, rojo means red. So now if we put 10 words together where we know what all these words mean, then we can make a sentence. It was better than Google, still not that great. And of course, ChatGPT comes out, and that changes a lot of things. And the quality is pretty good in a lot of cases. The idea of having being able to communicate with everyone, that's the Tower of Babel, and that's a really kind of utopia. I think it's a bit of a utopian idea. It's a really nice idea. I do think that you're going to need the interplay though, always between, I say it again and again, I think you're always going to need the interplay between man and machine. You always need someone, a real living person, to go through and check things, or to be able to at least provide the prompts for the machine to do what it has to do.
Right, and I agree. And in addition, language services, in many respects, and in my experience, are adjunct to other services, right? So, if I have a transaction that's cross border and there are contracts in multiple languages, I need ideally a lawyer who understands those languages. To work on my documents, because it's not a word for word translation, right? It's express what I am trying to achieve in this transaction in the other language, right? So it's get a concept across, get a meeting of the minds across, and on top of that, understand the technical words and phrases, which have their own meanings in a particular context, in those two languages that are in the transaction. And that is, some of that can be automated, but a lot of that has to do with, the individual experience, which resides in the human beings' interactions and history in a particular transactional environment. Regulatory compliance, dealing with, governments and regulatory agencies in different areas of the world is a difficult aspect of the industry to automate, because, a lot of that's interpersonal, some of it's political, and it requires relationships, so anything that requires, you actually having to be persuasive, right, with language, it would be very difficult to automate. I didn't want to not take the opportunity to talk about to run through your opportunity or your offering in the region. Maybe I should go back to this one. So, what do you see the opportunity in Latin America for your services?
Excuse me. Just as I mentioned very briefly in the slides, huge population, a growing middle class, and those two factors create new consumers, people who can actually buy products, services, people who are entering into moving from a developing country to a developed country. That trend of growth is going to require more translations, because the people locally will want to start doing business abroad. They're going to need to be able to communicate, or people from abroad wanting to do business locally. And of course, I mean, the heavy hitters in Latin America are Spanish and Portuguese, but even languages. There are lots of indigenous languages in South America, which we do work with as well. They're more niche, but it's a way to communicate with the local people, the local populations. The talking about culturally appropriate communication. This is what localization is. Sense of humor changes depending on where you're from. Colloquialisms, any sort of expression, you have to know who you're talking to. There are some things that you just can't say because either could be offensive at worst, or it just doesn't really get your point across, or it just doesn't really resonate with the public. And our end, that's where we consider that we're experts. We're not just translators, but we are experts in the culture. So if we're doing a translation for a project in Panama, we're not going to be working with a translator from Argentina. We want someone, especially when it has to be something that is localized to the market. You want someone from there who has experience from there. Same thing in Brazil or wherever you might be. Our big focuses are on documents. In this case, any sort of like transactional law, any sort of legal requirements, website localization. We do a lot of work for import and export companies, people trying to sell, people trying to buy from abroad. And this is all backed by our ISO certification. And we're especially happy with this. A lot of larger suppliers, pharmaceutical companies, for example, part of being an ISO certified company and fulfilling those requirements is that you work with other ISO providers. So, let's say pharmaceutical, maybe defense, security, cybersecurity. In order to assure quality in all the chain of command, they have to work with another ISO company, and we're happy to have that. We're happy to have that certification.
Could you drill down a little bit more on ISO? Because I'm going to be honest, that was, before I started studying you and getting involved and interested in the industry, I didn't really understand what the certification meant. So what does it mean? How do you get certified?
So ISO, essentially, the very, very basis of it is you write what you do and you do what you write. So you have to establish a very clear and strict protocol for doing essentially all of the business operations. That can go into accounting, that can go on to data security, but in the case of translation itself, what are the qualifications of your translators? For us, for example, in order to be ISO certified, our translators have to have a university degree and 5 years of experience working in whatever language. Also, you only translate into your native language. You don't go back and forth. So I do translations, but I only translate into English. That's part of an ISO requirement. For example, when we have an audit, it's an external audit that comes in every 2 years. How many non-conformities do we have? And we have to keep track of this. The non-conformity is how often are things handed in late? How many customer complaints are there, if any? Ideally, there's none, but things always happen. So we look at this, we look at the data, analyze it. You have to be above a certain threshold of, I don't know, 1 complaint per 300 translations sent in, for example.
Right.
Of that non-conformity, how do we fix it? Once you figure out how to fix it, you implement it into the writing, and you go ahead and from that point forward, that's how you start doing everything. So it's kind of the idea of continuous improvement.
And how long does it take to achieve ISO certification? I mean, what's the process? What's the point? I'm asking because I want to highlight that it is a process, right? I mean, it's not filling out a form, and,
No.
Not everybody has it.
It's the audit itself takes about 3 8-hour days of someone coming into the office, and the preparation for it takes at least a month. So that's having, when someone comes in to audit you, they go through all the files. We want to see the projects that you've done on the 10th of January from this year. Show me what you've done. Okay, pick that one. What was the process like? How was the communication with the client? Did you follow the payment protocols? Who was the translator? Is the translator a native speaker into whatever language? And they'll pull random information, random examples. In order to prepare for it, what we do on our end is we have to make sure that everything is properly laid out for the auditor, all the information, all of the processes are well spelled out, written out, provided to them in basically a big binder so that they can read it, review it, and make sure it matches with what we're doing.
Right. So it's not a gating issue. It's not allowing you to enter the industry, but it's allowing you to demonstrate your above average or special skill set and accuracy levels once you're there, right? So anyone can kind of open up, put the name on the door, but to have certification, you have to have been there for a while and proven over time that you're accurate and doing and professional in what you're doing.
Exactly. And it's something that, again, it's not a lifetime membership. We have to renew it every 2 years. So every 2 years, it's a lot of time and effort dedicated to renewing this. And of course, every cycle, we know we're doing something right when the processes change.
Right.
That means that we're evolving as a company as well. We're not just, if you don't evolve, then you fall behind. So we have to keep up with the industry as well. So now we'll have a new audit in May. How do we implement now, for example, using AI in what we do? What are the protocols for doing that? So this is, it's constant learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as an attorney, and dealing with courts internationally and government agencies and regulatory matters, they require that you use interpreters or translators that are government certified. Mm-hmm. So you can't just drop into those transactions in those environments with any translator. It has to, the accuracy is regulated by the government. And to me, this highlights the importance of an ISO certification, because as far as I know, there is no other market or benchmark of accuracy and skill in a commercial transactional setting than the ISO certification, right? So if you really want to, if your transaction is meaningful and you don't have fudge room for error and translation, it's something that is valuable in that transaction.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, the ISO is not just, so it's the International Standards Organization. The 901/2015 is for the translation industry, but there are ISO certifications for every industry you could possibly imagine. So what I have in the ISO seal means that we follow through. It's the same level of rigorousness to become an ISO certified company as a translation company as it is to be a manufacturing company, for example. Right. So it's something that anyone anywhere can look and say, yes, this is the same anywhere.
Right. Well, Panama in particular is a hub of the Americas. I mean, there are many areas in the world that are commercial hubs, but Panama truly is, for the Americas, a bridge from outside of the region to touch points within the region. On a very practical level, Tocumen Airport, right, is kind of really the hub and spoke of Central and South America. And there are a lot of opportunities to seek efficiencies by using Panama as a hub for manufacturing and for basically a regional strategy. Nearshoring is obviously a topic that's very important, and there are a lot of Guatemala and Dominican Republic and Panama growing in a growing way is taking advantage of that. I think that the translation services are going to be a really important piece of that for companies that are looking to enter the region in an efficient way and looking for ways to create some synergies within the region and have access to one of the biggest market in the world, which is the U.S. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in the region. I think that the ISO certification is really important. I think it's a point. I think getting relationships with players that are looking to do business in the region and communicating the importance of the accuracy that Idiomatic has is really important. I mean, this is a segue to kind of go to where you think, what are going to be the trends for this year and going forward, do you think, as far as, services and languages that are going to be in demand?
Well, the podcast, right, is focused on Latin America, and that is obviously, I keep saying, a big market. Spanish and Portuguese are huge. As we saw during COVID, I mean, you mentioned, right, nearshoring, we saw the importance of that. Mexico is becoming even more strategic as a bridge, a manufacturing and service bridge between in the Americas, just like you say, Panama as well, Guatemala, Dominican Republic. You need to be able to communicate with whoever you're doing business with. I even think in the south of Mexico, they're building a new heavy gauge railroad, just preparing for the nearshoring movement. I think that's going to be one of the next big hubs. So I see Latin America growing extensively as a place that has the infrastructure, location. It's near the U.S., near Canada. Obviously, with Mexico, you have NAFTA, so it makes things very easy to import and export. I also think that the trend for the next decade, in the 2020s, is in the translation industry are the emerging markets. That is where the growth is going to be. Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia, by far. So I really think that the industry, the translation industry, and just kind of the global economy in general, I think that we're really starting to see a shuffle in who are going to be the heavy hitters on a global scale.
I did a quick look at some experts' projections for the top 10 languages that they believe will be in demand in the next decade, and here's the top 10. Mandarin was number 1. Spanish was number 2. Arabic number 3. German 4. Russian 5. Portuguese 6. French 7th. Japanese 8th. Korean 9th, and Italian at 10th.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
Yeah. I think so. And I mean, we have to keep in mind, right? I mean, Spanish is Latin America, Portuguese, Latin America, Arabic can be Middle East, can be in Africa, French as well, huge Francophone Africa, huge population. Russian, we'll see what happens, I think, with the political situation, but Chinese as well. These are the new big economies that are emerging, and I'm excited to be a part of it. What we do, we're an intermediary we help people build things. But I enjoy that because we learn a lot about what's happening in the world. And if we can play our part in helping the economy grow, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, when I look at these languages, I see it as kind of an inflow and an outflow, right? So part of it is, reflecting growth in emerging markets where there is a growth in consumers, right? So there are more consumers in these emerging markets that are possible customers. But it's also a manufacturing, it's also a production. It's a reflection of the ability of these markets to produce products and to send it to other emerging markets, right? So what am I trying to say? In Latin America, there is a need for Chinese translation because there's a lot of there's been a history of cooperation relationships with China, with many of the countries within Latin America, on many levels. That's a true opportunity is to have some Mandarin translation in transactions and the matters within Latin America. Arabic as well. Clearly Portuguese and French within Latin America. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities, and these are all languages that Idiomatic covers, right? I mean, this is within your portfolio.
Yeah.
I said 150 languages, but how many languages do we actually cover?
We do cover. We have done over 150 different languages.
Okay.
Of course, there are languages that maybe in a year you only have one request. Other languages that you'll have hundreds or thousands of requests over the course of a year. Pretty much every European language we work with quite frequently. We're doing a lot of indigenous languages in South America, Middle Eastern languages, African languages. And these aren't just from whatever language into English. So we do Arabic to Portuguese translation and vice versa. We do Spanish to Chinese translation and vice versa. So it's not just limited to source language and English. We have the professionals to cater to, in this case, the Latin American market.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of the languages I just listed into Spanish. So Mandarin into Spanish or Arabic into Spanish. French into Spanish because Latin America is one of the fastest growing emerging markets in the world. So there's a huge opportunity. I think this is I think the industry has really exciting things to do in its ability to facilitate transactions and commerce and to, as you say, help people going forward in a collaboration with emerging, technological resources and capacities. And it's going to be really exciting. Language is as diverse and complex as personalities of people, and cultural differences and idiosyncratic, things that are idiosyncratic to a particular culture. So it never is going to be boring. It's always going to be something new and exciting to do, and there's always going to be an opportunity to create value. So thank you so much for your time. I hope we have an opportunity to talk again. Maybe we can drill down on some aspects of what you do, because 40 minutes is not a whole lot of time, and I know we have a lot more to talk about.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I enjoy talking about language industry, but also I enjoy talking about business, how language relates to business on the global level. More than happy to, if anyone wants, I'm more than happy to talk about anything. Come on again, talk about something in specific, give examples of what we do. Always happy to give a few case studies, some funny examples of translations that we've seen as well that we've had to correct from people. More than happy to talk and provide any information that I can.
All right, Gabe, it's been a pleasure. Thanks again, and hope to have another opportunity to talk to you soon.
Yeah, likewise. Have a good one. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.